Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Stoppage Time on Friday, May 3rd. It's great to be back with you again this week. I'm going to drop a little alliteration on you this week. I want to talk about loneliness, Latin America, and then drop a little spice of alchemy in there for your Friday entertainment and informational purposes. So I hope you're having a great week. It's been a fantastic week here for me in Los Angeles. And I just have had some thoughts that emanate from an interview I just did this week with the current episode of the podcast Entrepreneurial Thinkers that we dropped today on audio, and we'll drop our YouTube version of the show on Monday, and some of the topics that came out of that, which is tied to loneliness. I want to go back, and I had a couple of conversations this week with some good friends, and just reminded me of my connections and deep passion for the entrepreneurial economy across Latin America. And though I've not been there for a while, I want to touch on that a little bit. And then I want to drop in my book recommendation for you, which is kind of a special one that actually is a recurring book in my life on a yearly basis. So that's what we're going to talk about with you today. Start at the top, loneliness. As I sit here in my apartment by myself, which is also my office, the headquarters of my businesses, working alone as I do so often. One could say, like, are you lonely, Rob? And I would say, no, I'm not. Actually, I'm not lonely at all. Although I do a lot of things in life singularly and independent of others. I am very blessed and very stably not lonely. But having said that, just because that's the state of life that I live in, the data actually is showing us that my experiences are not necessarily reflective of the experiences of us as a society at large. And so I was fascinated. I have been fascinated by this topic for the last couple of years. And so I was fascinated enough that through the referral of a friend, I reached out to Sam Karshenboym, who's COO at the Lox Club in New York City, which is started as an online dating app platform, but has really morphed into kind of a dating platform services company that is mixing together hybrid in real life matchmaking services and interactions alongside its technology-based dating platform. And so we dove into this topic of loneliness. Some of the statistics that Sam brought to my attention and that then I went and did some research on were just shocking. I mean, like, loneliness is literally contributing to an increase in heart disease, an increase in likelihood of stroke. I think it's like a 60% increase in the likelihood of a premature death. It's showing increases in potential effects related to cancers. And that's just on the physical outcome side. But obviously we all can relate to loneliness affecting us on the mental health side, right? So it has spiking effects as it relates to depression, instances of hypertension, instances of anxiety amongst young people, middle-aged people, older people. It seems to be kind of this ubiquitous, silent, I don't want to say killer, right? But disease of loneliness. And so the data is telling us that indeed we are living through an epidemic of this. And so some of the questions that Sam and I dove into on the Entrepreneurial Thinkers podcast this week were on the idea, like, did technology cause this? Is this as a result of dating apps? Or can technology be a useful tool to try and solve for this? And Sam had not only his own personal opinions and experiences, which are inspiring and fascinating and very insightful, but he also was able to bring to bear in the conversation kind of some of the data perspective that the platform, Lox Club, has been able to accumulate over the years that is telling us, kind of indicating to us whether or not people are leaning into this or backing away from it, whether or not people are using technology to solve for this or are afraid to, and how it's changing our behaviors. Is it changing our behaviors? Is the loneliness epidemic causing us to become more lonely and more alone? Or is the loneliness epidemic pushing us out into society to try and connect and reconnect more? And so if you are fascinated by this topic as much as I have been, I'm going to strongly encourage you, I'm going to ask you nicely to go check out the latest episode of Entrepreneurial Thinkers. It dropped on audio across all your favorite audio podcast platforms yesterday, Thursday, and it'll drop on the video channel on YouTube on Monday as usual. So check it out. Second topic of the day, Latin America. I was having some conversations this week that reminded me that it's been, again, about 4 years since I've been home, a little over 4 years, maybe almost 4.5. that I've been home here in Los Angeles and not immersed in my life as a nomadic entrepreneurial builder, coach, mentor, advisor, founder across Latin America as I did for most of, say, the end of 2015 through the beginning of 2020. And although I deeply miss it, and I'm not as connected to the entrepreneurial economy of LATAM on a daily basis as I used to be, these conversations that I had this week reminded me that I am deeply, deeply embedded there still, and really, really still passionate about the opportunities there. So I just wanted to drop in and remind everybody of the tremendous opportunities that exist just to the south of us in the region here, in the Western Hemisphere, that are available for both entrepreneurs as well as for investors. So just kind of speaking from kind of a startup, entrepreneurial innovation technology perspective today, let me just give you some stats, because not everybody is as aware of the details as I am. So how large do you think Latin America is? Well, let me answer that for you. There's 33 countries involved in Latin America. How many people do you think live in Latin America? You may or may not know. Those 33 countries add up to about 652 million people. It's expected that by the mid to late 2030s that population will be up to about 750 million. For some context, the United States is about 330, 340 million. So there's a tremendous population opportunity down there. I'll give you some other context on the economy. The size of the economic weight and heft of the Latin American region is, it all combined adds up to about a $5.1 trillion economic engine. Inside of that, some countries that people are maybe probably more familiar with, Brazil and Mexico are the number 1 and 2 economies in the region. Brazil's economy is about a 1.9 trillion. Mexico's economy is about 1.5 trillion. That puts Mexico in at about the 15th largest economy in the world. So right there, one of our biggest trading partners from an American standpoint is Mexico. And it has arguably the 15th largest economy in the world. Brazil, a slightly larger economy on a global perspective. So you've got powerhouse economies that are taking advantage of all these global shifts and changes that we're seeing in the last 5 to 10 years in particular in relationship to China, and a kind of an eroded relationship between China and the West, but more specifically China and the US. And right to our south, we've got really innovative, young, fast-growing economies that are positioning themselves to be terrific alternatives for the American business partner or investor. To me, I have said for years, I've literally said this since 2015, 2016, when I landed in Latin America originally, that if you were an American investor in tech or VC, and you were looking for essentially better valuations or undervalued assets, better opportunities for you to have greater upside long-term, look no further than the Latin American investment market. Now, many of my friends and former clients who are very savvy, smart, intuitive Latin American investors themselves in the market have done just that. They've capitalized on all of that. And then what they're doing is they're taking the best and brightest of those founders and those companies as the companies mature in their portfolios, and they're bringing them to the larger markets in the US and beyond, right? So there's always been that kind of lineage that says, when I was in Chile, for example, right? If you were a Chilean startup or early stage company, your aspiration was trying to prove yourself locally, then prove yourself, say, in the neighboring markets, Argentina, Peru. Then if you could do that in the South American region, then you could take that success and try and bring it into the Mexican market. And then that was your doorstep into the American market, right? So those opportunities have not decreased. And in fact, if we trace it back, we could say that venture capital really kind of got its start in 2014, 2015-ish timeframe, maybe a little bit earlier in Mexico and Latin America. And it saw just an exponential rise up until the peak venture capital period that the rest of the world experienced in the last 2 years. And then it has suffered the same. It peaked, it's come down, and now it's restabilized again. And so there's tremendous opportunities. I would also point out, and this was one of the conversations I had this week, there's a native innovation that comes from the region, right? That is in part born of the fact that these are developing economies. And so in a lot of ways, there are entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial thinkers throughout Latin America that are solving for real problems that exist down there, or bringing solutions from more mature markets to bear on those developing markets. And you see this amazing confluence of what I would call real ground up innovation. And so that always provides long-term opportunities for growth. So again, regardless of the ups and downs of any one particular short cycles of 2, 3, 4 year range, the truth is Latin America is going to be a growth opportunity in a market for everybody to be involved in for the next 25 to 50 years. So pay attention to that. Even though I may not be down there on a daily basis, I am still, as we say, hashtag long LATAM, as much as I am long LA. Having said that, this would be a natural opportunity for me to like quadruple down on the alliteration today and talk to you about Los Angeles and its natural synergy with the Latin American market, especially with the Mexican market. But I'm not going to do that today because I want to be conscious of your time. And I really do want to get into my book recommendation, which today, sticking with our Latin American theme, is by Brazilian author Paulo Coelho, which is called The Alchemist. And The Alchemist is one of my favorite books. It's a rare book in this recommendation series in that it's not something that I've just read once. In fact, I read this book or reread it once a year. It was recommended to me years ago by my great friend and my storytelling Sherpa and a wonderful alumnus of our Entrepreneurial Thinkers show, Yogi Roth. And I literally recommend it every time I meet an entrepreneur. If I meet an entrepreneur and investor and I haven't told them that they should read The Alchemist, I would be shocked. Because it is ultimately a story about a young shepherd, Santiago, who goes looking for his great conquest, his riches. And what he discovers through his journeys across the desert is that it is actually in the journey, right, that he finds his purpose, right? Which is a metaphor for the fact that it's in our life, it's in our day-to-day living that we find our purposefulness, and that we find ultimately that our purposefulness that we find on that journey, that's the win, right? There is no magic pot of gold. The pot of gold is the journey itself. So without getting into the rest of the details of the story, it's this magical fable. It's an incredible story. It's beautifully written. And I really, really do encourage any entrepreneur especially, but just anybody in general who loves a good story and is looking for a little bit of inspiration or direction in their own life, to take the time to go listen to it on Audible like I do, or buy it at your bookstore, or buy it at Amazon, or wherever you get your books, and go to the library, pick up a copy of it. It's a classic. It was originally written in Portuguese. It's been republished across the world in probably just about every language. And although it is a classic, it's funny, it was only written in like the 80s. So it's a relatively young classic, but it's one that I really, really encourage anybody who's a dreamer or is trying to find their path to go partake in and find it. So that's it. I hope you've had a great week. It's been an awesome week here. I've got a couple of big kind of monumental hurdles that we're going to jump over here in the next coming days that I'm excited to share with everybody. But in the meantime, I wish you peace and love and joy in your weekend. And I really do hope that these stoppage time conversations that we have, or that our main show episodes that we produce for you at Entrepreneurial Thinkers, provide you a little bit of spark, provide you a little bit of inspiration, provide you a little bit of empowerment, to try and just think differently about the world that we live in hopes that we can all leave this place a little bit better than we found it. So peace, love, have a great weekend, and thanks for swinging by and seeing me in Stoppage Time.